Welcome in, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to this week's recap of the Lansing Watchdog, your trusted source for small business news. As always, my name is Jacob Manning.
And I'm Kelly Saunders.
And Kelly, there really is only one place that we can start this week. The legislature pulled an all-nighter last week and pushed the entire fiscal year 27 budget across the finish line. Tell us what went down.
Late last week, the House and Senate passed a $75 billion fiscal year 2027 budget after a marathon session that stretched 21 hours. The Omnibus Conference Committee didn't even meet until 5 a.m. on Friday, July 3rd, after gaveling into session, respectively, on Thursday morning, the 2nd. And lawmakers were cutting around an 883-page bill that few of them had time to fully read when it was essentially go time. The headline is that this budget is about $6 billion lighter than the current year's $81 billion plan. The way you describe that reduction depends on a lot on who you ask. House Speaker Matt Hall framed it as sniffing out roughly $3 billion in waste, fraud, and abuse. And Senate Appropriations Chair Senator Sarah Anthony pushed back on that phrase, saying that cuts were meaningful efficiencies. This budget marks an end to an era of one-time federal COVID-19 money, and lawmakers were working around a roughly $1 billion deficit. On top of that, changes to the federal One Big Beautiful Bill Act restricted the provider taxes Michigan had used for years to draw down additional Medicaid dollars. Leaders in both parties say they closed that gap without cutting Medicaid or food assistance benefits. They also added $10 million for work assistance to help recipients prepare for new federal work requirements. This year, special project spending, sometimes called PORC, was capped at a combined $120 million across the House, Senate, and Governor. That is about 0.1% of the $4.3 billion in requests that were at the table, a dramatic tightening from the COVID flush years. The final votes were 27-9 in the Senate and 99-7 in the House. It passed with bipartisan support, but not without bipartisan grumbling about a process that ran conference committees into the middle of the night, and according to some members, sidelined a lot of subcommittee work. We covered this year's budget specifics in yesterday's small business briefing, and we also included an article in this week's newsletter for some of SBM specific issues that we were tracking. Now, Jacob, the education budget, what they call the school bus, rolled through in the same overnight session. What's in it for our members?
Yes, so the Omnibus Education Bill, which this year was House Bill 5630, along with a companion Senate Bill 903, keeps Michigan moving towards a system where dollars start to follow student need by investing further in a weighted funding formula. Under this new weighted funding formula, districts get larger increases for students with greater needs. And that includes lower income students, English learners, and special education students as well. There's about $1.7 billion set aside for that, a $258.7 million increase over what was in last year's budget. Per pupil funding also goes up $250 per student from $10,050 to $10,300, which supporters are calling the highest level in state history. The budget also smooths things out by using a 3-year enrollment average to count students. On the top line, the education budget is $19.8 billion, which is about $1.5 billion less than the current year budget. Roughly $1 billion of that is an accounting change. The budget stops assuming certain federal dollars it may not receive and instead directs the state to seek all available federal funding. Proponents insist that it's not a hard cut. There's also a big push on literacy in this budget, with funding for the Letters Science of Reading phonics training bumped from $50 million to $75 million. On that same theme, the higher education budget expands the Michigan Reconnect program to residents aged 21 through 24 with last dollar scholarships. Previously, it was set at 25 and up. The Reconnect program's line item rose $25 million, now sits at $67 million in total. Community colleges also see a net 1% increase in their funding. As with the general budget, a lot of one-time earmarks and pilot programs got pared back, which is a clear sign that the COVID-era funding surge is now officially behind us. Now, Kelly, before we go, we did want to mention that there is a major shakeup in the U.S. Senate race that our members are watching closely as we head towards November. What can you tell us?
Over the weekend, State Senator Mallory McMorrow suspended her U.S. Senate campaign, and she's pledged to support whoever wins the Democratic nomination on August 4th. That has set off a scramble between the two remaining major Democratic candidates, Congresswoman Haley Stevens and Abdul El Sayed, the former Wayne County Health Director, to win over McMorrow's supporters. Stevens is pitching herself as a coalition builder and compromise candidate, and she's picked up endorsements from Emily's List and Attorney General Dana Nessel. El Sayed is running as the progressive in the race, leaning into a message against establishment and corporate spending, and just landed endorsements from progressive Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and State Senator Stephanie Chang. Whoever emerges will face Republican Mike Rogers in November in a race that is sure to be one of the most closely watched anywhere in the country. One practical note for members who voted absentee, ballots have been in voters' hands since June 25th. So some Michiganders may have already voted for a candidate who's no longer running. If you'd like to spoil and recast your ballot, you can submit a written request to your local city or township clerk. That request has to be received by 5 p.m. on the second Friday before the August 4th election, or you can do it in person at your clerk's office until 4 p.m. the Monday before. Can you close this out for the week, Jacob?
Yes, before we go, we'd like to remind members that we have some upcoming owner-to-owner events. These are our regional gatherings and are designed for small business owners to connect with their peers. We'd love to see you there. We'll be in the Capital Region this Thursday, July 9th. On July 23rd, we'll be in the Great Lakes Bay region, and we'll be rounding out the month in the Wayne region. We have plenty of dates planned for the rest of this summer and into the fall. For more information, scan the QR code below me here or visit sbam.org/events. That's going to do it for us this week. Thank you all for tuning into the Lansing Watchdog, and we will see you next week.